trying to achieve equality with the annihilation of category is not a successful route.
Yes, that's exactly right.
We're in this era where it turns out we were never the boss.
It doesn't look like an ideology.
What's beneath the surface of people we admire, of the ideas that define our time, the history we are told?
And welcome to Russell Brand.
Under the Skin.
Jimmy, thank you for joining me on Under the Skin.
I'm very, very pleased to be here. It's a beautiful show you do. I think you're. It's a very interesting transition. I love it.
Thank you for observing that a transition has taken place. I dreamt about you last night.
Well, I mean, listen, you're a man with needs, and I know sometimes in a marriage you don't get everything you want.
That's
physically.
Right. Yes.
And so I understand that.
You fulfilled. You filled a hole, shall we say?
Well, I mean, why wouldn't we say that? What was that? There's a weird anxiety when someone tells you, "Oh, I dreamt about you last night." There's an immediate anxiety of, "Well, I hope I was good. I hope I was funny. Was they okay?"
You were in a position of, I would say, avuncular authority, and I regarded you with benevolence.
I mean, I feel like that's nothing but net, right? That's exactly how you want to appear in someone else's dream. That's if you're going to appear in someone else's dreamscape, that's what you're looking for. Avuncular power.
Do you feel like that in a dream? Do you feel like would you agree with a more Jungian perspective that it's all archetypal energy that's sort of dealing with inherent and innate aspects of my own psyche, or a Freudian perspective where there might be some residual? I mean, the fact that I'm talking to you today, like obviously it must have been on my mind as I was going to sleep. Thinking about it now, I did masturbate over the possibility of this, and possibly, who knows, maybe that I didn't, because I don't. So do you think...
Are you off the masturbation? Have you? Because I mean, it's my favourite Seinfeld episode. Is it Lord of Their Own Domain?
Lord of Their Own Domain. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right.
Version of that. But are you currently? Are you off that?
Yeah, I'm like vegan. I don't look at pornography. I'm intermittent fasting. Death will be a relief.
I don't look at pornography either, but for different reasons. It's because I finished it in the second lockdown.
Well done. Well done.
I got to the end and I put my initials in.
You've done this, have you? This book, Jimmy Carr,
well, that
Before and After.
Did in the second. It wasn't just masturbation for me. I wrote kind of the. I mean, it felt like it was obligatory to write a biography in the lockdown, but really it was a choice between that and a podcast, and I took the dignified way out.
The page I've opened it on, Jim, it says like that you use a Jung quote: "Until you make the unconscious conscious, you will call it fate, and it will direct your life." Like, did you feel, because you are such a devotee of humour and its incumbent requirement to never take things seriously, to continually peek from behind the veil, did you find the sincere aspect of writing a biography challenging?
I mean, I did. I think it's a very interesting point you make there, because I think we're both kind of doing that thing of going, especially with this book now, I kind of went back and looked at your book and sort of, you go, well, you can be very sincere about life and not serious about it. Everything is better with humor. It sugars the pill. So the idea of going, look, my sort of, my gift, you've got to lean into your edge, whatever you're good at in life. And I'm good with jokes. And I kind of felt like, well, self-help's like, I've got an awful lot from sort of the general area of self-help. That bit of the bookstore has given me a lot over the years. And I kind of wanted to put something back. And you sort of think, well, Eckhart Tolle can't write dick jokes, and I can. So it felt like low-hanging fruit. Like there's no competition there, because it's a brilliant bit of the world, sort of self-help and self-improvement. But it's very earnest. And I haven't got that earnest energy. I kind of find that a bit difficult.
Yes, I'm interested in that, and that's something that I would like to discuss with you later. But I'm first of all going to have to address that you used the phrase dick jokes and low-hanging fruit so close to one another that I have the image of sort of a bunch of low-hanging reproductive organs all jangling together like dreadful mangoes.
Well, it's a great image is what it is. You're very good with that.
Thank you.
You're very good with image.
You were right at the vanguard, I reckon, with personal development. I feel like at some very early Edinburgh, some almost pre-TV Edinburgh, knowing that you were into NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, like one of the tools that people like sort of Richard Bandler and sort of Tony Robbins and sort of people like Paul McKenna like sort of espouse. I remember knowing that you knew a lot about that. Is that something you apply directly in your creative content, or more in making you the man that can operate at the level you operate at?
I think it's one of those things where it becomes, I mean, to use a very NLP term, it's the idea of it's unconscious competence. At some stage, you kind of learn that stuff and it becomes a part of who you are. And that's how you mediate the world. So that the great sort of, the sort of central premise of NLP, I think, is that the map is not the territory. How you see the world is not how the world is. It's how you see the world. So your perception is, your disposition is more important than your position in the world. 95% of life is how you see it, not what happens to you. And it doesn't appear that way. It appears that things are constantly happening to us and that we're reacting to them, but really how we react to the world is everything. And then it's got that like central premise question, the fundamental thing, the thing that really spoke to me about NLP. And I think it's one of those things where I wouldn't recommend NLP particularly to people, but I'd recommend trying a lot of these different things. And then whatever is the one that resonates with you. So you try all these different flavors and go, but that's the thing that I like. So for me, that central premise of like, what do you want was the most fundamental, simple question, but also the most profound and life-changing thing. If you can answer that in any given scenario, it's better.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes I find things that are applicable in like quite particular areas of creativity, e.g. acting. What do you want in this scene will always help you to approach a scene differently. Or in terms of storytelling, like there's a lot of stuff that, what's the main man in storytelling called, like that you do courses on?
The hero's journey?
Yeah, actually not Campbell, the one that's more directly about screenplays. Anyway, it don't matter because in adaptation, Brian Cox plays this guy, and I went and saw him and did a course with him, and he was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, like he said this thing that he said like that the only way of like in writing a screenplay, in demonstrating love, is sacrifice. Everything else is affection. Now, like he was talking about the context of storytelling. But I feel like that's pretty applicable anyway.
That feels like we could spend an hour unpacking that. That's huge, isn't it? It's such an interesting thing of going, everything else is affection, but sacrifice demonstrates love. And you think about every movie you've ever seen does that. But also if you think about, religious stories and what they mean to us. And I'm not a religious man. That's where we differ. I'm an atheist, but I haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Those stories still mean a tremendous amount to me. What do you get from those and what do they actually mean? Kind of decoding those seems to be a very valuable thing.
I'm reading Huxley's Perennialism at the moment, in which he, of course, looks for themes and types that are recurrent throughout various mythologies and scripture in a sort of Joseph Campbell way, but I guess it's even though it's a pretty popular and populist book, it's a little more esoteric in like direct quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, then from the Bible and Meister Eckhart.
A bit populist. Yeah, populist. Yeah, sure. No, populist. Yeah, no, it's a bit like J.K. Rowling. It's flying off the shelves, mate. Flying off the shelves. Have you seen the audiobook? It's number one. What are you talking about? Populist? If
you haven't got a copy of Aldous Huxley's Perennialism in your home, have you seen the cartoon franchise? Often with my Happy Meal, I get an Aldous Huxley little toy. Just with my fries.
I read the graphic novel and I got more out of that. I really enjoyed it.
You're more of a visual learner.
I read a brilliant thing last year called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Have you ever read it? It's like a media studies book by Neil Postman. But it was written in 1984 and it was written about basically the difference between Huxley and Orwell. And the idea that there won't be some oppressive power from above oppressing us. It will give away our power for drugs and treats and diverting things. And the idea that you go, it's absolutely come to pass. It's a brilliant piece.
Yes. I guess that I've like downstream captured a little bit of that we live in sort of Huxley's saccharine dystopia as opposed to Orwell's bleak one that through pleasure we can be controlled.
I think it's a weird that my favorite quote of all time, I think, is William Gibson, the sci-fi writer, said, "The future is here, but it's not evenly distributed." And the idea that we have in our world, we have lots of different things going on. So actually, the George Orwell 1984 world. If this podcast is going out in China, if anyone can get hold of it, yeah, that's what's going on there. But here, come to the Western world, we've got the Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. It's not like everything's okay here and everything's bad there. It's different levels of what's actually going on. Yeah. And then there's people kind of popping their heads up and that feel a little bit awoken.
In a sense, that's a good way, Jim, of demonstrating your earlier point about position and disposition, that to assume that there's an absolute reality that we're all participating in evenly is a kind of solipsism. But as well as us having like these very discrete and distinct individual subjective experiences, I'm starting to suspect there is a kind of cultural subjectivity, that we operate in little boxes that we are afforded, and that doesn't just apply to us as individuals, but beyond our individuality there are certain sets of assumptions we live within.
One of the things I talk about in the book is sort of how your beliefs change everything. Now, when I changed my beliefs in my mid-20s, my life changed fundamentally, and I went from having kind of quite a boring life to having quite an interesting life, and all that changed really was my beliefs, and I wanted to share that with people. That was the reason to write the book, to go, right, well, I've had a son now, and I want to share that with him and to the wider world, to go, like, I can't pay back what I was given by that, but I can pay it forward, that sort of thing. And the idea that, yeah, you're kind of, you know, as you move through life, you kind of what you believe, the rules that actually govern us aren't the rules from above or outside. They're the rules within, the assumptions we make about ourselves. I'm not the kind of person that does that. I'm not that kind of individual, so I will never even try it. I won't allow myself to. You're sort of limiting beliefs. It's one of the things that I love about what you've done with this podcast, with your kind of, there's a pivot in your career where you've gone, well, you always kind of felt to me like, more than anyone I think that I knew, you very much kind of like identified with that trickster god of comedy. So, you know, comedy's from music hall, and it's from Variety, and it's from the Court Jesters, and Speaking Truth to Power. And before that, it's from Trickster Gods, you know, Anansi, and it's from, you know, the Monkey King, and all of these kind of brilliant figures in history. And it strikes me that kind of devilment is kind of what you played into. And then that's the thing that I see, that there's a wisdom in those trickster gods, that you've kind of gone, oh, that's my edge. Not necessarily the comedy. It's the shamanic comedic thing that comedians do. That's going to be that bit of it is the thing that I'm going to move across to this new life, and that'll be the consistent part. It's a really interesting transition that I've seen.
Thank you for that observation. You've always been so encouraging to me, always, Jimmy, right from the get-go. And I feel like...
well, it's one of my great regrets.
That you have continued to encourage me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what can you do? What can you do?
A few crunching early tackles, and the world might have been spared a lot of silliness. Like what I feel like in that regard is that because in a sense there is a culture waiting for us, and like it's sort of like people that know you and follow your career will know that you worked in finance and you made a decision. I guess this is the pivotal decision that you refer to in your book and that you alluded to just then. You made a decision to move into comedy, and I wonder if you feel, as I often do, well, there's a pathway for entertainment and comedy, and if you have that inclination, then you're likely to find your way into that path. But actually now now that I'm older and able to reflect, entertainment and comedy as a commodity, or really anything as a commodity, although I recognise, you know, this is a business that I'm in, that's not actually what I want to do. If that profession didn't exist, I wouldn't have invented it. I would more likely have gone into a path that was connected in some way to mysticism and preaching. Those are the kind of areas that felt attractive to me, but there wasn't a model for it. Do you feel ever restrained or confined by the expectations of your discipline, our discipline as comedians, or do you feel that you have absolute fulfillment within it? And I suppose in a way this book suggests that there are other areas that you're willing to explore and open to, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with, you know, my job as an entertainer. I've always kind of viewed my style of comedy as being very kind of, it's quite transactional in a way that I never gave away a lot about myself. So I've been in comedy 20 years and people know very little about me. They just know, okay, well, we come and see him every 2 years when he's on tour, and he makes us laugh for 2 years. And I always kind of remember that thing of like, people never remember what you say; they remember how you made them feel. And I make people feel good, and they come to a show, and there's a lovely sort of tribal element to coming to see a show where you come as you buy tickets as individuals or a couple or a bunch of friends, and then you come and you sit with 1,000 people that you don't know, and there's this amazing sort of shared experience of like laughing together. And it's such a social noise. I mean, it's much older than language, laughter. It's like and you become like this little tribe of 1,000 people for that night, and it's very special. And then you go off on your merry way, and I'll see you again in a couple of years. I'm very happy with that job. I really like doing that. But obviously there's more to me than that. Everyone is complicated, and everyone is kind of nuanced. And in the world that we live in, especially with 140 characters in social media and a couple of Instagram photos, it would appear that everyone is incredibly consistent at all times. Like, he's always the funny guy. And so part of writing the book was to kind of go, well, within my sort of media brand, you kind of go, well, you could expand it a little bit, and you could be a bit more kind of yourself on stage. And I'm trying to change up the kind of comedy that I do as well, trying to write longer stories and routines that have more of a point to them, just because it's interesting to me to kind of to go, comedy for me, the reason it's so pleasurable to do, and the thing that I think others can relate to, is it's a task without end. You're never finished. You never feel like, well, I'm as funny as I'll ever be. You go, well, I can do more. I can change the way that I present this, and I can maybe give people a deeper experience and more fun. But fundamentally, that thing of, I feel like you got frustrated with the entertainment aspect and wanted a more meaningful connection. And I'm very happy with the entertainment. I'm as shallow as a tinker's bath, Russell.
I love the algebra of the comedy that you are most commonly associated with. I think it's brilliant, and I don't ever underestimate comedians that do that are able to create the arithmetic of neat jokes. I love it. And when how I write, I think, because you've helped me before and certainly sort of attended gigs and given me sort of like pointers in the past. What I do is I'm going to tell this story, I'm going to tell that story. But when it comes to it, nothing lives if it ain't funny. You can't stay in the show. There is an archetypal requirement, even now as I become more ambitious or grandiose, depending on your perspective, with the intentions of my show. There are certain rules. Like, I don't like being up there if there's not a laugh every 20 seconds. So that hasn't changed. It's not like the sort of the model of entertainment is like, oh, I don't want to do this obligation to entertain people. It's like, I just felt like a need for a different type of purpose and fulfillment. But I'm devoted to comedy.
It's interesting when we talk about your writing now, because it's like I often go down this sort of edgy route, because you get a lot of there's an expectation there because of the stuff I've done in the past, but also that's what I find genuinely funny. That's what makes me kind of the gut-wrenching laugh, my crazy laugh. It's about that edgy humor. But it strikes me that you're kind of in a position now where you're building you build up kind of a comedy's about release. And often I'm releasing something because it's a tense subject. It's a subject that's difficult to deal with. And I view it as being, I like to think of myself as a progressive. It's not bigoted comedy. It's not conservative. It's progressive, and it's searching out new things, and it's kind of, you're pushing things, and it's kind of you're almost like when you push stuff, you push it so far, you almost cross the line twice. You push it so far that it's like, you can't take that seriously.
Yes.
So it's often the fact that people go, how'd you get away with saying that? Well, it was so ridiculous and so not an opinion, it didn't matter. But it strikes me, you've got an interesting thing now, because you're on stage, often when I've seen you talk about, addiction, spirituality, stuff that you have a lot of, experience around, and you go, and when there is a lighter moment or a throwaway phrase within that, it's such a sort of relief of the, okay, well, we're talking about something very serious that we related to. And then, it strikes me that you're in a unique position to help, because people with, let's say, addiction problems. I mean, the 12-step program is, a lot of my friends are in 12-step, actually. I've noticed a lot of my friends have gone through that process, and it's that thing of, it's a life examined. It's a life explored. It's people that have really looked at themselves. But it strikes me that no one's done a funny version of that course. No one has done a version of that that has a lightness to it. And for some people, I think the heaviness of that is a bit too much. It's the presentation. So I do think it's kind of it's also something that I think should be taught slightly more widely.
Yeah.
I think it strikes me as odd that people have to reach a crisis point before they go and seek it. Like I used it for, I did a lot of Al-Anon stuff the last couple of years, which is
Why?
kind of the related. I've got some issues with people with I've got some people in my life that have mental health and addiction issues, and I wanted to kind of know more about it. And it's such a useful thing to kind of I mean, I don't think Al-Anon's even that well known. That there's something for, because when you have like it's a line that I have in the book. If you have a narcissist in your life, they have the disease and you have the symptoms. Mm-hmm. It's often that way. If you have someone that you love that has an addiction problem, then you're dealing with that problem. You have the symptoms. And what's the best way to go about it? And the sort of thing with jokes that's analogous to kind of wisdom is, like, I love quotes. My book is sort of peppered with my favorite quotes. There's so many in there. And it's because everything else is burnt away. And like, for me, that's what the jokes remain in the show. Like, you're going to make this important point on the show. You're going to say these things. And then all that, and the funny bits remain. And they sort of glue it all together. And with quotes, I feel like everything extraneous got burnt away, and it became like a cliched quote. But because that's the nub of the knowledge. That's the thing. And it's almost like the same thing as like the story of Christ or whatever, where you go, oh, everything that isn't essential got burnt away. What remains? It's like hard times. Like I'm not religious. I don't believe in an afterlife, but I do strongly believe in a next life. And I sort of think it's interesting talking to you as a friend that I knew when you were just all about comedy and stand-up. And now I see, oh, that's died. He's gone. That's been burnt away. He's in the next life now. He's talking about spirituality and awakening. And, he's doing the same job, but from a very different angle.
Yes. And I suppose that you're similarly advancing, or at least changing direction, when you say that you've developed a curiosity around different spiritual programs. And I want to talk to you a little bit about atheism, because I guess it's a subject people like talking about when there's a difference of opinion, at least. And also I'm curious about how, I wasn't sure because you didn't directly tell me. I just picked up that, from seeing your, I guess now your son's name, that you have become a father, and congratulations. That's,
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, yes. It really feels like I'm very late to the party. I'm quite an old dad, unless I move to California, in which case I'm a very young dad. But it's amazing. It's that, I mean, to throw another quote at you, it's like having a medical procedure where your heart now lives outside your body. You sort of go, I can't, but it's like finding an extra gear. Yeah. It's finding an extra thing. It's almost like the analogy of video games really works for me on having kids. It's like, I'm a straight white man, right? So I was on the easy settings anyway. And then not having kids is like, it's like having a cheat. And then suddenly you have a kid and you sort of feel like, I thought I was all in before. I thought I was kind of committed to this thing. And then you have a kid and it's tremendous.
Yeah, I felt like there was an energetic spike with the birth of the first one that I've never fully come down from, even though there has been considerable variation in the timbre of emotion since the elation of the birth that includes a considerable amount of frustration and downright rage. But you never fully have returned from the, oh my God, there's something else, there's someone else.
Well, I suppose it's again, talking about the afterlife, the next life, it does feel like a next life. It feels like you're in a different phase as soon as you sort of become a father, because we're all sort of, we talk about Jungian archetypes, but you're sort of leaning into those archetypes, and we're both, have something in common in that we were jesters, we were comics on stage, making people laugh. That was our kind of, and it's a weird, I love being a comic because it's that thing of like, we're out for ourselves, but in it together. There's this lovely kind of yo ho ho, a pirate's life for me. Like, no one leaves their job and becomes a comic to be successful. No one has that level of kind of, hubris. You kind of leave to go, I don't really care anymore. I'm just going to do the thing that I like. I'm just going to do the thing that I enjoy. And, the process will be enough. And, you kind of get into a flow state. And that seems to be where happiness lives, like getting into a flow state as often as you can. The idea of doing something where you lose track of time, where you feel totally engaged.
This flow state and this idea of a next life, as if there is, some essential pivot, even though, like, speaking personally, I do feel a continuum. I feel like I am the same person I was when I was 5, 7, 9, 30. Like I still can feel that the forms and resonances of all the people that I have been. Sometimes I feel that when having conversations with atheists, whether it's you or Ricky Gervais or Sam Harris or or David Baddiel, like I talk to atheists all the time, and often Brian Cox, I have a lot in common with.
My best friends are atheists. I'm not against them.
But I feel sometimes that when you say, I don't believe in a sort of a life after death or whatever, like for me, I feel like whether it's people that have a religious belief or a lack of a religious belief, that often what we're discussing are kind of, if not straw men, then certainly abstractions that are not helpful. Because when you talk about this flow state, in a way, you're talking about something that is, speaking personally in my understanding of these terms, when I'm talking about like being live, appearing live, performing, like when it's good for me, there is nothing. There is a vibrant nothingness. I am entirely present. Like, when my mind, if my mind switches on when I'm performing, I'm in trouble. If the critical thinker appears when I'm on stage, obviously I know that I know enough to not walk off the edge of the stage or let a flying bottle, and God knows there's enough of them, hit me in the face. Like, it's like, but I'm in flow. I'm in a flow state. Now, what is this aspect of our being? And I suppose, look, you can't immediately extrapolate this into, if there's aspects of your consciousness that are latent and dormant that can be enlivened or brought to the forefront in a way that at least seems to parody or parallel what the book of Job is talking about, when Yahweh is in conversation with Job, helping him to recognize that there is a higher transcendent self as personified, or of which Yahweh is an emblem. If you can overcome the carnality, the dumb carnality of the behemoth, if you can overcome the unconscious amygdala consciousness of the Leviathan, that there is in your terms, a second life, that there is a new consciousness, that there is a flow state, that just living by the book as a good man like Job was, living like in the old ruts, is not a worthy life when compared to the awakened, enlivened, burnt away. Because Zen uses those metaphors of burning away. Christianity, as you mentioned, uses those metaphors. Yeah. For me, of course, in a sense, the distinctions and differences between whether or not, the architecture of the afterlife or whatever, for me, kind of become redundant. And I feel like a lot of people, people that I really look up to and admire, say they're atheists, but when I hear them talking about their conduct, their belief in ethics and morality and goodness, they are referring to something... perhaps not you. They are referring to something ethical and transcendent and somewhat mysterious. And get into that with us, Jim.
I mean, it's interesting not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that thing of when you first become an atheist, I think there's a tendency for it to be, it becomes the center of your life briefly, in the same way as a religious belief. It becomes kind of dogma. So I'm not a fan of that. I don't see it as a cold academic. I saw atheism as a rush of blood to the head. It's about when it happened for me. I lost my faith around the time. I found it very empowering because it was losing my belief that there was an interventionist God, losing my belief that there was fate, losing my belief in anything kind of, I suppose, preordained. And the idea that you just kind of went, right, this is my one life. That's what makes it special. I've got one life to live. What am I going to do with it? What am I going to spend my days doing? And then suddenly that became, it's the ultimate in procrastination, organized religion, because you're saying, well, don't worry about this life. There's eternity coming up. So don't worry about this. Don't worry about any pain and suffering here. And it was that thing of like finding purpose struck me as such an important part of my sort of mid-20s. Finding purpose, now, you might say, well, actually, your purpose is spirituality. But for me, it was going, right, I'm in charge of this. It's just me in this world, and I'm going to kind of pursue it.
This idea of eternity, Jim, it's not eternity in the hereafter. It's the eternal present. Like that, if you don't live in a projection of the future, don't live in the memory of the past, sure. Live in the eternal present. And that's a sort of, I think, a Wittgenstein notion. And for me, this sort of
it's a very good notion. That idea of kind of the power of now. I mean, I sort of joke about it in the book because, Eckhart Tolle is, it's very much the power of now. I was going to call the book The Power of Later because all self-help says, I just didn't think anyone would get the joke, but thankfully you did. All self-help says the same thing. It's all kind of prioritize later over now. Do the thing. So the idea of kind of getting with that in my mid-20s, it was like it was going right. I'm gonna live, for the future. You have this perception of kind of what I want to be and what the road that you're on, and that and they're all sort of analogies for kind of we try and be present, but also with an eye on where we're going. And religion for me wasn't helping at all. Wasn't a helpful thing. Wasn't useful. It's also that, I mean, I lost my religion. I went to Israel on not a pilgrimage, but I was interested to go and see the Holy Land. And it just fell away. It was the opposite of the
Christian perspective, or from a
Christian perspective.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because I know it's everyone's bloody holy land. So as you still are describing archetypally experiences of epiphany, like with the that position disposition thing, that moment of discovering, that is a kind of epiphany. Hold on a minute, reality is not external, reality is internal. Like the idea of an of inverted commas, an immanent God, that there is a source, force, and awareness within you that if you attune to it, you can alter reality. Like, I know this.
Not just described, humanism. That's the it's a different way of kind of, the idea that it's all within you and you are enough and you can do whatever you want. You can do. There's nothing that another man can do that you can't do.
Also, though, like, when we push that a little bit, the categories of inside you and outside you, other than in sort of quite rudimentary physical ways, start to melt away, even with sort of biochemical stuff like respiration. Like the position disposition tool can be applied to the point where even your own subjectivity is burned away till you become in the world and not of it, which you'll perhaps remember from your Christian days, which in my mind I like to think lined up nicely with that period where you had that hair.
Yeah, no, I had longer hair.
Was it that?
I was trying to be like this in a very literal sense. I identified, which I think it's a look you're still rocking.
I'm really clinging on to it, Jim, with both hands.
Good, I mean, it's the thing. What do you currently believe? I don't know what you currently. I mean, I listen to the show, and I wouldn't be able to put my hand on. But do you find that it's not useful for you to? I mean, I say an atheist is kind of a shorthand because it's just easier to go. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a God. I don't go to church. I don't think anything happens after you die. It's a good catch-all, but it doesn't mean that you don't have an awe and wonder. And you have a child, and you sort of sense that you sense that everything that was written in the selfish gene kind of come to be. You sort of go, oh yes, passing on their DNA. I'm being the vehicle for the DNA really feels like a spiritual thing for me.
Rob Newman did a wonderful bit where he sort of broke down how paradigmatically the selfish gene was basically the Old Testament, that it was like the sins of the father. It was a wonderful, wonderful piece of stand-up. But I suppose in response to where I stand, I guess the sort of things that I would hang my hat on, as it were, Jim, were that are a kind of, ideas such as perennialism, that there are recurring archetypal beliefs that are not social but actual, fundamentally universal. So they're not coming about because human beings, wherever they are in the world, are having similar experiences, so create similar cultures, but in fact because there is an object beneath apparent reality expressing itself through the gross and rudimentary fabric of the material world, that consciousness is not evolved from biological matter but indeed precedes it and is a panpsychic component of reality. So that doesn't lead us to a Christian or Judaic or Islamic or Abrahamic, I suppose, or even a pantheon such as the Hindu or Greek gods, but leads us instead to the idea that ever since the Enlightenment or post-Enlightenment rationalist thought believes itself to be at some kind of apex. We used to think this, but then we realised that. But makes the same mistake that each of its antecedents made, that this is the final frontier. Now, what I believe...
I often think about I had friends when I was at college. I had my friend Henry Nichols, who wrote a couple of very good popular science books. about sleep and about tortoises, weirdly. But a very good scientist, very good Darwinian scientist. And we used to talk a lot about religion and faith. And we were talking about kind of evolution. And I'm fascinated by the idea that we're not finished, that this isn't it, that this isn't the end of the line. There's nothing to suggest that this is the end. So what happens in a millennia? I mean, if we manage to survive, if we don't kill ourselves, what happens next? How do we develop? Are we going to look back on ourselves now as we would look back on cavemen?
Yeah, how could we not? And also to add to that the markers of technology and medicine that are often espoused as the summits that we currently occupy are false markers, not that because they are not fantastic and marvelous and of course useful, but because they obscure other areas where we haven't advanced and progressed and could. In Vedic philosophy, the idea of siddhis, powers that are dormant within us and accessible, and in a sense these are merely amplifications of what you said with the position and disposition.
It's a really interesting, I mean, if you take it out of the spiritual as well, you if you look at ourselves kind of culturally, if you look at kind of what because I think a lot of our society is about sort of pretending that we're not animals, pretending that we're above that, and being in our kind of minds, and then you have a kid and it's very mammalian. You feel like, oh right, she got big and she was pregnant and then a baby came out and you see it and then you got to take care of this thing and you feel this incredible like connect to nature. You suddenly feel this connect to everything kind of living and going, okay, we're all kind of in the same boat. When the cat has kittens, when the dog has, whatever, you kind of feel like, okay, we're all doing the same thing. There's a lovely kind of connection to that. And I think our society, in the way that it's set up, the kind of eschewing decay, that's the phrase, isn't it, that they use? Like that whole society is kind of set up to pretend we're not going to die and that we're somehow above this all and very sophisticated and we're not animals. We're animals. It's nice to kind of lean into that once in a while and kind of go, yeah, this is kind of who we are. It's why I think it's an interesting sort of trick that we're trying to pull of going, right, we're very sophisticated. We're going to look back on this and go, oh my God, these guys were idiots.
Jim, where are you? Are you in a hotel room or are you in a dressing room? What is that?
I'm in a hotel room in Exeter, which used to be an eye hospital, the eye infirmary of the west of England. Nice.
Yeah, that's where you are amidst the optics. And what are you on tour, mate?
Oh, always on tour, yeah.
What do you do, 2 or 3 a week?
Okay. Huh?
2 or 3 a week, always?
I do maybe 5 or 6 a week.
Bloody
every
hell.
Week. I'll occasionally have a night off, but really, my problem is that work is more fun than fun. It's a great problem to have, and I feel like I get to be around a lot because when you gig in the UK, it's very different for American comics because their stuff's about being in airports and away from home. But I'm away today because I had 2 gigs that are pretty close together. But I'll be back tomorrow. I'm around a lot during the day with the kids, so you feel like you get that life, and then you go out in the evening when everyone's asleep.
How did you feel like the first one after your baby was born? How did you feel like the first time you were on stage after that? And was it very long after?
Not that long at all. A couple of weeks. No, a week. Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I wondered was it going to soften me? I was slightly worried. I was like, is it going to soften? Because I'm kind of an edgy comic, and that's what people, And I thought, am I going to be on stage talking about my kid? And I will be, but it's going to be. I'm the same guy. I remember he was born premature. And so I had to go and buy these tiny little so we got the tiny baby grows, tiny. You can't believe how small they are. And then they were massive. They were way too big for him. So I had to go out and buy more. So I went out on the Edgware Road and kind of went looking for baby grows and found these tiny little ones that they do for preemie babies. And the lady at the counter went, "Do you want the coat hangers?" And I went, "That's a bit late for that." You know what? I'm gonna be fine.
Very good.
I'm the same guy, but I still find the same things funny. But there's another gear that I found. Well, back to the religious thing because I didn't quite nail down.
Well, no, you never will, Jim, because it's completely the wrong perspective. Oh, well, you're going to ask me more questions?
Yeah, no, I'm interested in like your because I like the way that you do this podcast. I like the way that you talk to people, but I feel like sometimes I kind of almost want a little previously on Russell. under the skin are like, well, previously he believes this, and this. So I know it's kind of quicksilver in your hands, but it feels like it's quite an interesting thing of like, because most people, when you talk about them that have a spiritual element to their lives, say, well, I'm a Hindu or I'm Jewish or I'm Christian, and they come from a tradition. But it doesn't strike me that there's much. What's the label that you're closest to?
I like all of them. I'm in them all. You know, in the same way.
That was the thing that really stopped me from being religious. When I went to Israel, I felt like, well, if I'm right about Christianity, then everyone else is wrong. But you're saying that's to miss the point entirely, and I should just go, no, everyone is right.
Yeah, what are they saying really? And again, I try to look at it rationally and as scientifically as anyone who is not a scientist plainly can, with just the blunt anthropological observation that for hundreds of thousands of years we lived within a kind of shamanic order, acknowledging that whilst, as you observe, still abstract though it seems sometimes, that we are mammals, animals, but somehow seeded with the divine, if you consider this light of awareness to be part of some original form, some absolute. Because what I believe is not dogmatic other than the solipsistic dogma of being me, I feel like if I went to a mosque or anywhere where people are trying to connect with, there are two things. Actually, like sometimes, Jim, I can get right double wank and esoteric about it, but other times it's just like Sesame Street, that you should feel connected to all things, try to transcend your personal ego, particularly in the form of self-serving, defective characteristics, and that the result of your spirituality should be kindness, and that yours...
That's it. That's okay. So give me those three things again. That's great. I think that's the perfect answer.
You're editing my religion.
No, but genuinely, I think that's really useful.
Is it?
I find that a very useful thing that you've just done there. Well, because it's about connecting and understanding, and that kind of the little three-pronged thing that you go, the Sesame Street version. Actually, go and just restate that, because that's, for me, that's like as a friend, but also as a listener, I think that's tremendous.
You're a good producer. You are a good producer. If you were a less good comic, you would be a fantastic producer.
Thank you.
I remember that from when I've done stuff with you. I already can't remember it, Jim. I'm feeling. I can't remember that thing that I said then.
We'll rewind and play it again. But
we're not recording this.
That kind of it's interesting as well, the spiritual holes that live within us, the undeniable spiritual holes. So if I look at the culture that I live in now, fame is the secular heaven. If you think about what does fame represent, everything will be all right if I'm famous. If I'm rich and famous, everything's going to be fine. It's the land of milk and honey. It's heaven, right? That's it. And then legacy. If you look at legacy and the way people are obsessed by what they leave behind, and people kind of doing weird things with their wills and leaving it to someone, or people trying to leave a piece of work that's special, or writing a book so you can have something on the shelf. That for me is like the afterlife. It's wanting to sort of live on afterwards, wanting to leave something behind. That sort of that need. So the idea of those things are still sort of cropping up in our psyches. Do have it's a common experience being a human being. It's a privilege. It's the great privilege is to be alive and to be yourself, and to and then beyond that, I mean, the reason to kind of write the book was to sort of share with people the greatest privilege I think you get to have, which is finding your sort of edge in life, finding your purpose and pursuing it.
Yes.
And most people don't get to do that. Most people don't get to kind of go, right, well, I'm not going to go down that well-worn path. I'm going to go and find my own way and find what I want to do.
Yeah, that's why we mustn't miss it. We mustn't miss this experience of being human, however we want, whatever framework is helpful. And my only reservation or objection to atheism is explicit stating that the foreclosure on the idea of different levels of reality that are beyond our comprehension. When you did the commonality of the mammalian experience, like the cats are doing it, birds do it, bees do it, we do it. Like, I feel like, well, look at even in that little graph, the gradients of conscious experience, that the impossibility of our level of consciousness to the cat. Do you think, as people have thought before, that this is the apex of conscious experience, or is it possible that there are other realms of consciousness accessible through mysticism and indeed psychedelics?
We've all met people with different consciousness. we've all met people that are like I sort of view my loss of religion in my 20s. I view it as, I mean, you would say a quasi-religious experience because it felt like I'd been sleepwalking through life. I was quite a bright man. I mean, you know, if you looked at my academic record, I was, you know, educated and I had degrees and passed all the exams and things. And I kind of felt like a dummy. I felt like I was walking through treacle in my early 20s. I was in the world, but there was a fog. And then suddenly, whoa, the scales fall from your eyes and you realize, oh, I'm in control of this thing. I can sort of go where I want to go with this. And then deciding what I wanted to do was, you know, the fundamental kind of the awakening. So it felt to me like quite a it felt to me like such a wonderful experience. I kind of wanted to share that with people.
Yes, yeah. I think you have such a beautiful gift as a comedian, as such an efficient, accurate, and deadly comedian. It's beautiful to see it applied.
I'm a professional killer.
And it's lovely to see it applied in this form. I wanted to talk to you about these sort of transformations. Like just when I've heard you talk about it on Desert Island Discs, and when I've seen them pictures, like even on things when we've done Big Fat Quiz of the Year in the past and stuff, like I feel a sort of an identification with you. And when I heard you talk about stuff like, you know, your mother, God rest her soul, although I acknowledge you're an atheist, and your even your allusion to dealing with addiction, and obviously I respect your privacy, particularly in this, you know, we're talking publicly. I feel a strong identification with you. I feel like you went a different way. I know there is a great kindness in you, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be facetious, but I feel like because you are so professional, and as you said yourself, you don't reveal a lot about yourself, and you don't weaponize or cannibalize your past in any particular way. I think people might be surprised by your decency and your ethics because, you know, you're known for being a sort of, a sharp and sometimes aggressive, particularly in this peculiar weird time we live in now, comic that, you know, and like the stain, like that, which we all bear our own versions of on the public consciousness of the tax thing that happened sort of fits in with that as, oh, this is a person that's quite sort of maybe mercantile or money oriented.
But you know, part of comedy is about honesty. Part of comedy is about like facing up to, there's two things you need to know in the world. I think you need to know who you are and you need to know how you're perceived. And those two things are rarely accurately aligned. I mean, you want there to be some overlap in that Venn diagram, but who you are, who you know yourself to be, and how you're perceived in the world. And actually, if you know how you're perceived, it's quite interesting to go, well, that's always going to be an advantage if you can use that. So to go, right, I'm perceived in a certain way. That means that I can write a book about self-help and about a journey and about finding yourself, and it'll appeal to a certain set of people with kind of that share my dark sense of humor and like what I do, but wouldn't want to read a very earnest book about that necessarily. So it's that thing of like sort of slightly you can kind of get the message out there in a different way. And that feels like a really good thing to do. It felt like it was. I mean, it's kind of a labor of love. I mean, the book's really written, as all books are, to myself. It's like a reminder. So at the end of the book, I went back and reread it. You know, for the audiobook, you have to reread your work, and you reread it. When I do about half of this stuff about a quarter of the time. If I did more of it, I'd be so much more like those little rules for life. You go, yeah, it's obvious stuff, but you don't do it a lot of the time. So it's kind of, it's constantly reminding yourself of these things, which is, again, there's a religious aspect to that. It's kind of the ritualistic kind of going, well, what do you cling on to? And for me, those kind of the quotes from those great writers over sort of millennium, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. And we've got these little things that we hold on to and go, oh, that wisdom, I've got to remember that. There's things that I heard 20 years ago that didn't mean anything to me. And then you hear them again and go, oh, yeah, dummy, that's brilliant.
Jim, may I ask, with the, and I mean this genuinely, may I ask about like your grief and loss around your mum? Is it okay to ask about it?
Yeah.
Of
course. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the question to ask any comedian, I know not many comedians come on the show, it's normally much more interesting people, but the question to ask any comedian is, which of your parents was sick? I think that's the nub of most comedians, I think, had to make things okay in their household. So they had a parent that was, or within their community, within their life, So they had a parent that was either physically or mentally ill,
Yeah.
and they had to make it. I know you had a similar journey to me in that regard, and it's something that I've placed a huge importance on being able to change the state within my home, being able to change people's states, being able to make the mood better, because I grew up in a home where the mood wasn't great a lot of the time. So that became an incredibly important thing for me. And then, losing your mother is, it was a very difficult thing for me. I think it was what psychiatrists call enmeshed. I had a very close relationship with my mother, that some psychiatrists would say it was too close, but you either love your kids too much or not enough. I think err on too much. That's a safe bet, isn't it? And then, so when she died, there was a huge, a huge kind. It's almost like the worst thing that could have happened. I remember like the first film I saw was Bambi. I remember that thing of like the archetype of losing your mother, thinking, well, that's the worst thing. When that happened, there's something freeing in the loss. There's something freeing in that grief where you just go, right, okay, well, it's just me now. I can sort of care less.
Do you feel a connection to that emotion, to that loss, to the recovery that you've made from it, and your new feelings of love for your family and your child?
I think recovery is like a strong sort of term. I don't know whether you ever. I think there's things you live with, and there's things you get over. And I think, a death at that level. I think grief is I've always liked that quote. Grief is the price we pay for love. The idea that there is a logic, a fairness to the world, and when you really love someone and they go, there's you can't deny that feeling. It's like it kind of equals it kind of, it's a zero sum. So I still feel it now. You still feel that kind of. I mean, obviously, the waves of grief is something people talk about. The idea that initially it's a fucking tsunami, and you can't do anything, you can't function. And then, 20 years later, just occasionally you hear a song on the radio and you're in a fucking puddle. But it's I kind of look forward to those moments now in a kind of perverse way, but because you feel so connected in those moments of grief.
Was there a part of you emotionally that connected becoming a father to the loss of the mother? Did it feel like something was completed? Did it feel like part of the same continuum to you? Were there connections between those things?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a connection there, right? I mean, it's also that thing of going, the kindness that you remember, and you go, oh, she gave up everything for me. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. In a way that you would know intellectually, but you wouldn't have known in your heart. The idea that you go, oh, right, okay, that's an incredible thing that she did. And then you try and replicate. But I suppose the other thing about losing a mother, losing a father, for me, is about those archetypes that we sort of come back to Jung a lot today in our conversation, which seems apt because I think he's such an important here. The idea that you go, well, if you lose your father or your mother, you don't necessarily lose that archetype. You have to find that somewhere else. And I think we're very apt to do that now. So the idea that you're doing this podcast and you're trying to sort of have a sort of a spiritual sort of leadership role, that's very much a father archetype. It doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter what age the listener is. It's like the idea that someone would go, oh, well, I didn't get that from my elder because that wasn't available where I grew up or my thing, but I'm going to tap into that from this.
Yes, I feel like people that have suffered that kind of loss that you've described there, Jim, have to self-parent in a way that might be kind of, by its nature, abrupt, and something that for me, as someone who blessedly still has both my parents, has been much more incremental. Like the idea of the acknowledgement, I suppose I'd put it this way, that ultimately adulthood is about the sort of sudden understanding that there is nothing between you and death. There is nothing. No one's coming. Mummy's not coming. Daddy's not coming. It's you. You are the person that you turn to. Now, like for me, like God is neither a placebo or panacea in that space, but like the part of myself upon which I can rely. Although that it is often in relationship also, it's the idea that I am not just this bundle of requirements, fears and desires. There is something else in here. And again, to sort of simplify it, the idea that a new neurological and biochemical territory is conquered with the child. When the child is born, you think, oh my God, there's this space inside me that I didn't know was there. That can occur more subtly and almost continually through various practices. I know that's not a question, Jim. A lot of the things I say
I don't know what you want me to say at the end of that. Ta-da!
They're not interrogative. A lot of my announcements, like they are sort of merely offering you the idea, in this instance, that it must be that you undertook something very early, prematurely even, I would say, a kind of self-fathering. And I wonder what that forecloses and what that opens, and how plastic it allows you to be for necessary future change.
I think finding that somewhere else is a very important thing, and I think people's egos sometimes get a bit sort of out of control. You know, so you become a father and you have no parents, and so you kind of think, well, I'm the big boss and I'm in charge. But I think elders, the archetype of elders and people within the tribe that know more, that have like that you model and map. So the idea of kind of modeling, again, it's a very sort of NLP thing, but the idea of looking at what you see in your friends when they're being parents, and you look at, okay, what does he do there that I really like? How is he doing that? How is he interacting with these children? But he's not trying to be his kid's best friend. He's trying to be a father. It's a very different flavor to that. So you look at these things, and you know, every day's a school day. I think that idea of kind of going, look, we're all kind of we're not in a tribe anymore. We're in these sort of hermetically sealed little sort of nuclear families. But the idea that we should try and live our lives a little bit tribally. We should try and sort of see what else is going on in the village and how else are people doing this, what's working.
Yeah, I wish I'd spent more time. When you asked me just now, like, to outline that religion, another thing I feel is that we need to synthesize what we evolved to do. We need to, we evolved to live in groups this size. We evolved to have a purpose. We evolved to cooperate. You know, that modernity is, you know, as the name suggests, a relatively recent phenomenon. We've only lived like this for a little while.
The thing that I'm, you know, most passionate about is, you know, comedy and laughter. And when I look at the function of laughter, and I've done, you know, some research on this.
Yeah, I saw that show. That was a good show.
Yeah, laughter is like 1 million years older than language. And it's like, it's sort of remote grooming is the function that it has. The idea that we go, look, we can have larger groups that are more specialized because we're able to laugh. We're able to sort of have this connection with other people. We're able to sort of go, I'm not a threat and you're not a threat. And, you know, you laugh in that space. Like laughter is the closest distance between two people. It's like, it's so kind of, it's so meaningful to me and so kind of important. That we connect in that way. And the people that we love are the people that we laugh with. You know, the best jokes in the world won't be from comedians on stage. They'll be in jokes with your friends and family. They'll be the little things that connect you.
Jimmy, when you've done that thing, we know some people may not know, but when Chappelle come over here recently, you did a turn there, did you? You did what, 20? Like, how did that work? I just heard about it and I just wondered what that was all like, and you could tell us about it a bit.
Well, Chappelle's an old friend of mine through one of my best friends is a guy called Neil Brennan, who I think is one of the best comics working. There's a show on Netflix called Three Mics, which I always recommend to people, which I think is the best stand-up special that anyone's made. I mean, I think it's phenomenal. It's so the three mics. So the first mic is jokes, and the second mic is stand-up, kind of longer form material, and the third mic is the truth.
Cool.
And it's like I look at it and I kind of go, oh right, okay. I mean, Neil's about my age and the same, but I think there is a kind of father figure element where you kind of look at that and go, oh, you've like exactly what you say. He synthesized what good comedy should be: jokes, stand up, the truth. So I do a bit of joke. I do a lot of jokes. I do a little bit of stand up, and I do no truth. And then through writing the book, through knowing Neil, I kind of went, well, I should do more of that. I'll do more truth. And finding the mix of those three things in your comedy of, like you say on stage, well, you want to do lots of truth, and there's a bit of stand-up, but are there enough jokes in there for the audience to make it to sugar the pill? Mm. It's a great show to watch. And you know, as I say, every day's a school day. You're sort of learning from these people. So I know Dave Chappelle through Neil Brennan, who he co-wrote Chappelle Show with Chappelle. So whenever he comes over to London, we tend to hang out and party, and I'll go up and do 20 minutes or whatever. On this last one, I just went up with Jeff Ross and we speed roasted the audience. It was fun.
Oh, you did a speed roast. Gosh, those terrifying things. Jimmy, what?
No, it's sort of like, I think doing a speed roast, especially with Jeff Ross, who's sort of a master of that, it's a really fun thing because it's almost like asking a comedian to improvise a whole show is almost like asking a magician to do real magic. Like there's something about the roasting thing when you get up 10 people from the audience and you go, right, we're going to roast all of you in a row. It's like going, okay, so we've done our training in the gym and this is live and we've got nothing prepared and let's see what happens. It's lovely. Those bits of a show where it's just happening, like not the material, not the stuff that you're sort of delivering. That's okay. It's a show and we're going to have fun. And that would be a night out. But the special bits that you go, this could only happen this evening. It's that guy saying that thing and heckling in that way. And I love that inclusive thing of comedy of like the audience feel like, look, we all share a sense of humor in this room. If anyone shouts anything out, it's all to the good. We're all in service of the evening.
Was there any, if I may ask if you're comfortable talking about it, did you feel any sort of cultural heat around it, given the sort of time and that where Chappelle is currently? Was that relevant? Was it in the room?
I think I don't think so. I mean, obviously he's preaching to the choir, so there were no voices in the room that disagree with anything he said. He did an incredible routine, I thought, about rape from a man's perspective, which I thought was one of the best things I've ever seen him do, and kind of sort of slightly threw it away. It was about a 20-minute routine that I thought was maybe the best thing I've seen Chappelle do. It was really interesting perspective. I thought it was great. I mean, obviously there's controversy around Chappelle at the moment, and there's kind of a cultural war going on, but really, I think it's that thing of going, is it edgy or is it bigoted? Is it coming from? Is it interesting? Is it? It feels to me like comedy lives in this space between private and public discourse. Yeah, and it strikes me that it's never been a wider. It's a chasm at the moment. If you watch the news or read what's reported in the papers, people talk in a certain way, and then you talk to people in the real world, and they talk in a very different way. Yeah. And what people can say publicly, the idea of kind of cancel culture, and the idea of, well, if I say the wrong thing, I could never work again. It's I sort of think cancel culture is the new burning books. I'm not sure I thoroughly approve. And again, if we're talking about religion and spirituality, I think religions do it better.
Yeah.
All religions do it better because they have a mechanism for forgiveness and redemption and a way back.
Yes. And
we fucking don't. We're like, if you read, obviously you've read John Ronson's So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And I've been publicly shamed. I've been that guy. Yeah. And I it was lucky that I was publicly shamed over something that's, there's a great phrase, we cannot forgive what we cannot punish. I was publicly shamed for financial impropriety. It's quite easy. You pay the money back and say you're sorry, you're good, right? You're whole again. But for most people that get cancelled or say something that's kind of out there, there's no way back.
There's this weird feeling, I feel like, that since Trump and Brexit, everything's Trump and Brexit. Every issue now is Trump and Brexit. COVID, Trump, which side are you on? Masks, which side are you on? Everything now, fractionalized, divisive. Everything has become sort of polarized.
The thing that I sort of see, I don't know, I mean, I think there's two things going on that I think are interesting. One is social media isn't a echo chamber, it's an amplifier. So if you're a little bit on the left, you go crazy left. People are wearing T-shirts saying, I'm literally a Marxist. And you go, motherfucker, are you not aware of what just happened? Like, we've only learned one lesson from the last 100 years, which is fascism is wrong and millions died. But we didn't learn the other lesson. Communism's wrong and millions died. They're both terrible. I'm like a radical moderate. But the idea that these kind of, that the social media makes you go to these absolute extremes of the view, and there's very little discourse going on. There's just these people in their sort of separate trenches throwing things at each other, but no one's really, it's not discursive. There's no kind of dialectic going on. There's no kind of progress. And I think, kind of where are the great thinkers? I think academia seems broken. It seems to be there's only one side in academia now, and who, where are the great thinkers? I think it'll probably come out of, it might come out of podcasts. You never know. Kind of long form thinking and getting out of your comfort zone is a really sort of valid thing.
Yeah. Oh, Jimmy, mate, thank you. Should we? Well, perhaps we'll endeavour to do something where we went to a restaurant one time. I remember that. I remember a time you came and see me in a suede jacket at a fire station and encouraged me comedically. It was a former fire station. It would become a comedy venue.
Yeah, in Windsor.
Right.
Yeah, and listen, anytime you need anything, man, I'm there.
Thank you.
I'm there for the. It seems like things are going great at the moment, though, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy. Another thing, was when you helped me with that show, I feel like it. Like I think every so often, the show I'm doing now is kind of more like what you were pitching and suggesting then. Like I do a lovely, I think you would like it, sort of 20-minute bit about sort of parenting and a camping holiday and the sort of frustration of trying to operate in normalcy with the paraphernalia of my character, and I think you would like it. It was something that you were sort of driving at when we were discussing that. But I'd love to come and see you. I'd love to hang out with you and chat to you, and I'm very grateful.
I'll pop and see you next time I'm in the area. It's been an absolute pleasure today. I think this is a really wonderful thing that you're doing. I think it's really interesting, frequency of having this podcast where you talk about these things and people can kind of tune into it and feel like it's whatever it is, an hour a week of sort of good conversation and thinking about life. And it's church, man. It's church.
Thank you, Jimmy Carr.
Praise from an atheist. Take care.
Lots of love. Good luck tonight. I love you, mate. Take it easy.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
See you now. Bye.